Hello and welcome to At the Open Gate and our favorite feature talent treasures, where we get to talk with our Open Gate friends about their top number one Clifton Strengths talent theme. And for those of you that aren't aware of the Clifton Strengths, it's a profound and wonderful tool from the Gallup Corporation that helps people identify their talents and ways that we can apply it in our personal and professional lives. And I'm Nancy Mackey, owner of Open Gate Consulting, and I've long been a fan of the Clifton Strengths 34 uh, instrument and use it in one-on-one work with folks and teams. And joining me today is Mary Adams, a social media manager and wonderful talented individual. And we're so happy to have you join us today, Mary. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Mary, your top talent is communication, which that means folks who are good conversationalists and presenters and tend to turn events and conversations into stories. Does that sound a bit like you?
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit more about that. How does that play out in your daily life, your talent for communication?
Um, well, I find that actually my daughter comments on how I make friends with everyone, with complete strangers. I feel like strangers are just friends I haven't made yet. I feel like everybody is a friend. I'm that person that will make friends in the line at the grocery store. Or we went to Subway one time and I was chatting with a sandwich person and my daughter looked at me and she's like, you really do just make friends with everyone, don't you? It's
Yeah,
like,
she
you know,
saw.
like you just talk to everyone.
Yeah,
Because I really just feel like I mean, we're all living this life together. We're all living this experience together. And I think that everybody has a story to tell. So I find that when I am open, it encourages other people to also be open and
yeah.
they are able to share their stories as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, right? Because I'm imagining for folks like yourself that just feels natural like breathing. That's what our number one talent theme they say is almost like breathing.
Oh, for sure.
And
Yeah.
right? And so yet a lot of people are very uncomfortable with just reaching out or starting to have a conversation with a stranger. Have you ever thought about the fact that not everybody maybe is as comfortable doing what you do so easily?
You know, I have. My husband is actually, he's autistic and introverted. So he's not really one to strike up a conversation. He'll engage
Yeah.
in a conversation once someone talks to him, but
Yeah.
he's not usually one to start it. So it hadn't really occurred to me though until really I had gotten closer to him and
Yeah.
realized that not everyone does that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and do you find that well, you kind of said this already with your daughter, but do you find that other people notice this talent in you, and how do you get feedback?
Yeah, for sure they do. I've had a lot of feedback from people, just about that I'm easy to talk to, or, that they're able to open up to me, or they feel like, I'll just accept them for who they are. Because I mean, I do. I don't
Hmm.
judge people either, because
Right.
that's not my job.
Yeah.
I also get a lot of comments. So in a church setting, I will make a comment, and a lot of the time, almost every week, people will come up afterward and just tell me like, "Thank you for your comments. They were so insightful. That really helped me," or things like that. Um, which I honestly I just am talking.
It's coming
I'm just glad it
naturally.
helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think about myself as a facilitator. I always appreciate folks like yourself that are in a group that can help the energy. I'm imagining you keep the energy in a group going.
Yeah, I am typically the one that uh I do always have something to say. So,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I am in that kind of a setting, I've actually told, presenters or teachers or whatever before, like if you're really needing audience participation, feel free to call me out because I
You're the
also
gal.
have to say, you know, like I
Right.
just and
You
I
won't.
always will I'll feel free to I'll be like, feel free to like tell me that we don't have time for this. Like I'm sorry
Yeah.
to commit.
You
Again,
won't be shy.
I do sometimes tend to talk too much, I think. But,
Uh,
some people, I'm grateful that people do find it helpful
mhm.
most of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, and to tag onto that comment, how do you see people benefiting from your communication talent?
Um, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I think it helps people feel a little bit more open and a little bit more communicative with me as well. I think I find that sharing confidences, it paves the way for others to share confidences with me as well, for
Mm,
others to also open up. Openness begets openness. And so I think that facilitating that connection, being able to be the one to start it, um, it kind of emboldens other people to be able to also share whatever it is that they need or want to share.
yeah. I find that people where they have communication in their top five tend to find, I mean, everybody has a certain level of angst about public speaking, but people with communication tend to relish it or be really comfortable in those environments. Do you find that true for you too?
For sure. Yeah, I actually did theater a lot. So when I was starting in high school, and I actually went to college. I did theater in college as well. And I found that, I mean, other than my ums and my filler words, I typically am pretty confident. I haven't really struggled a lot with stage fright or anything. I also sing,
Mm,
and so I've been asked to sing a lot. Last minute, even it's like,
yeah.
hey, we have this thing tomorrow. Will you sing in it? I was in choir. I often was the choir director knew me pretty well, and he often would just give me the solos because he'd forget to assign them, and then
Yeah.
just be like, "Here, Mary, you're doing it," because I
Yeah.
know that you can and that you will.
Yeah.
And I think that leads into also because music is another form of communication,
Good
as
point.
is theater. I think performance is another facet, just an extension of communication.
Yeah.
So in all of those instances, I didn't experience an extreme amount of stage fright or anything,
Hmm.
or being worried about performing or doing those things in front of people.
Yeah.
To me, it's all the same, whether I'm speaking in front of someone or a crowd or whatever. If I'm speaking, singing, performing, the one thing I can't do
Hmm.
is dance. I'm
Hmm.
terrible. I'm a terrible dancer.
Although we could say that's a form of communication too. Yeah.
Well, then I'm really bad at that form.
I think this talent is more probably verbal communications. I think we're okay. So, yeah. Well, and let's say you find yourself with a problem or a dilemma to solve. How might you use that communication talent to start tackling something?
Actually, I very much am the type of person that I talk things through. I think out loud. So
Mm,
I often will use my husband as a sounding board of like, there's this
yeah.
issue and we could do this or we could do that or we could do or that. For me, my thinking is very external.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one to like mull things over and then present it to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more the type to like talk it through because
Yeah.
sometimes I will think over things and then once I say it out loud, I realize I'm like, oh, that's a terrible idea. Never mind. Like we're not doing that.
That's how your brain hears it, maybe.
And yeah, and it takes me actually verbalizing it to realize like, oh, that's actually not a good idea, or hey, that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
often
that's
how I'm
fascinating.
able to work through my problems.
Yeah. Well, and of course, and having worked with the Clifton Strengths for a while, that the themes are neutral, right? So we always look at the fact that they sometimes can really allow us to great things, and then sometimes our number one and number two talents in particular can get in our way sometimes. Do you identify any ways that maybe that talent becomes a barrier for you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier, but sometimes I have a tendency to talk too much.
Hmm.
I will find, so I call my mom and my sister almost every day,
Yeah.
to talk and to check in and things like that. And I've had to intentionally remember to ask them about, to tell me about their day or tell
Yeah.
me about whatever, to a point where, to an extent where I will actually ask them first because I'm like, if I need to do this now, so I remember so that if they have something to say, they can say it because once I start talking, I kind of lose sight of
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah.
My sister is also pretty private and introverted, so she'll just be like, "Oh, we're fine. How about
Yeah.
you?" And then I start
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
And I've told her before, I'm like, "You just need to say more.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
please say more because I want to know more about you." But I start talking, and then I lose track of everything, and then I'm out of time.
Yeah.
Because I often will call them like while I'm driving. I
Right,
really hate
right.
driving in silence. I call people when I'm
Yeah.
in the car.
Oh, I get that. I get that. And so, what a great strategy, though, right? What a great way to manage around that barrier, that particular, I mean, that you're aware of it. I think I like to say 90% of resolving a challenge is just simply awareness of it, right? We're aware we
For
got a
sure.
problem, then So, are there any other strategies you found to manage around that particular challenge? I think that's a great
Um,
one, right? Just asking right up front.
yeah, yeah. I also will, I'll try, I'm uncomfortable with silence. So I try to allow myself to create more space for
Mhm.
other people
Mhm.
because other people are not like me where they are able to or where they start to think out loud. They often will take a moment to think about what it is that I've said before responding.
Right.
So like with my children, I'm a mom. With my children, if I ask them to do something, I actually saw this, I don't remember where I saw this, forever ago. But I count to 10 very slowly before I repeat myself or before I expect them to actually move and do anything. Because it takes a minute to process
Right.
what it is that you've been asked to do or told to do or anything like that. So if I ask someone a question, I often will if they don't respond quickly and if I feel like it's taking a while, I will slowly count in my mind. With my kids, I'll be like, well, do you need help with this? Or how can how can I help you get started or whatever, if they haven't started by that
Right.
time.
Right.
It really, it's consciously allowing space
Yes.
and silence
Yes.
and, an ability to process, some
No,
time to process.
100%. And what a powerful tool and tip, right? And I think that's a really good one for a lot of people to hear, right? Even if communication isn't, I think a lot of people kind of struggle with that discomfort with silence and just even being able to count in your head. Again, back to that awareness, right? And that we're fostering better communication as a result of that. So I think that's great. What a good strategy. So,
Thank you. I also use it at work. I don't just use it at home. I use it
yeah,
with my husband. I use it with, my coworkers or with my
yeah,
employers or,
yeah.
whatever.
It's awesome. Yeah. Well, I know in the Gallup, they also will contrast different themes. And so I wanted to share a contrasting theme and see what you think about it. So there's two words here. One is communication. There's another talent theme called context. And I forgot to check where that is on your Clifton Strengths 34. I don't remember. It
I don't
probably
either.
doesn't resonate with you, so it might be a little further down. But communication, so what that means telling a story helps others understand my message. Context is more about history, so the retelling of history helps others remember the past. So, what's your take on those two talent themes? Any similarities, or are they just polar opposites?
I mean, there are similarities for sure. Um, I think if you think about it, like history is a story.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most engaging like history teachers are the ones who will make it a story. Like
Right,
that's when people engage most
right,
with history and seem the most interested in learning it or will actually remember it. People are more likely to remember stories versus facts and data.
right,
Um, for the most part. You have some people who rely heavily on data and facts, and that's, what resonates with them. But the majority of the population will relate most with stories. So I think they are related but different. So I
hmm
feel like you said, I'm sorry, was it context?
context. Yeah,
Context
context.
versus communication. Yeah.
Right,
So I feel like context relies more on fact and what's happened, right? It's
right,
history. Whereas communication relates more in like it's more future leading. It
right,
leads to more ideas and potentialities and possibilities and things like
right,
that. So I feel
right,
like communication is more, yes, it's important. Communication is important with context. Like, they go hand in hand. Being able to relate history as a story and make it more relatable to people to be able to remember it.
right,
Um, and using those historical, facts and contexts to inform your, daily life
right.
decisions, or even your current decisions. Um, but communication goes a little bit beyond that, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and a great example in your telling about how we all need each other, right? Which is another principle of Clifton Strengths that people, no one of us is going to be talented in all 34 different talent themes. It's just how our brains are wired, and that's not a bad thing. And so, if context is not in my top 10, which I don't think it is, that those folks that are can bring that historical knowledge are a real benefit. and we can definitely lean on each other. So that's a good example of that.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you think about Mary, like in the workplace, what do you need from a manager to really allow your communication talent to thrive?
I think for me, um, I need clear communication and clearly defined expectations
Hmm.
as to what job they're wanting me to complete. Um, I need parameters, I need a good idea of what it is they're looking for. As a social media manager, I am able to, create stories. That's actually communication is great for social media because
Right.
the point of social media is to connect with other people, to communicate with other people. Um, but I find that sometimes, when I will create certain types of posts or different kinds of things, I'll be like, well, this isn't quite what I actually had this experience not too long ago with a client that I write copy for that I had written a post and they're like, well, this isn't quite what we're looking for. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what are you looking for exactly? Because they're like,
Mhm.
well, this is great, but it's not what we're wanting.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's good to have very clear communication as to like, this is like this type of post we're looking for, this type of copy, this is the kind of
Mhm.
response we're looking for from people you know um, with another client where I'm the social media manager, I'm in charge of all of it. I do,
Mhm.
the images, I do the planning, I do the execution, I do the copy, I do the
Mhm.
posting, I do all of it.
Right.
And so with that one, it's very open-ended. And so I will sometimes get feedback of like, oh, this post isn't exactly what we're looking for, but they haven't given me any kind of parameters as to what they're looking for. So I just kind of post whatever I want and hope that is what they want,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, for a while they had me approve with them the different kinds of posts that I was making. And they're like, okay, yes, this is the kind of thing we're looking for. So I have a better idea of what they want.
Yeah.
So I mean, for the most part, like they're not worried about it. They don't check on me or anything. They'll just see a post and be like, oh, hey, good job. I liked it,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
That's the
Um,
feedback you're getting.
yeah, so feedback is very important as well. So being
Mhm.
able to have those clear-cut parameters and then having clear feedback. Like I'm not worried about getting my feelings hurt. You don't need to be
Mhm.
like as a boss, as my if my employer doesn't need to be like, okay, this is really good, but I get, just like, okay,
Mhm.
you know what? This isn't what we're looking for. We gotta scrap it and start from the beginning. Be like,
Yeah.
okay, great. What are you looking for? I'm very, very direct,
Yeah.
is what I'm looking for. Very direct communication. That being said, I don't obviously don't want my manager to like tear me down and be like,
Right.
that sucked, you're terrible. Like,
Right.
I don't want
Right.
that. You know, um, so just yeah, very direct, clear parameters, communication, and guidelines as to what it is they want, and then prompt and clear feedback as to how to improve.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like clarity is really important to you. And like you said, parameters make it
For sure.
really like, yeah, kind of the basics of communication. So I get that. I get that. Well, as you think about maybe other people that enjoy this communication talent in their top one or two or five, one of the principles, again, with utilizing Clifton's strengths is being able to aim our talents, to be able to really just focus on getting even better at our communication. What advice might you have for other people in with communication, how they might really sharpen their talent even more? What are some things you might recommend?
I think honestly, reading is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to have access to a larger vocabulary to be able to clearly and explicitly communicate what it is that you are trying to get across will actually help. Sometimes I use big words and people are like, huh? But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, when I'm able to find the exact right word, it's very satisfying for me, for one
Right.
thing. But it's also a lot better for the other person because they know exactly what I mean, exactly what I'm talking about. So being able to expand your vocabulary is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think also being able to read the room is an
Mm-hmm.
important is a very important skill in communication. Being able to read when you've been talking for too long or when you've been especially talking about yourself for too long and being able to ask the other person. That one is a skill that's hard to develop.
Yeah.
So a tip that I heard one time was in when you're talking, if you've used the word I more than 5 times, stop
Mm-hmm.
and say, well, how about you?
Yeah.
what or what this means for you is, or how to, how this can help you, being able to relate things to another person. Because I feel like people with communication skills, they're really good at talking. You know, I have always been a talker my entire life,
Mhm.
it took a lot of honing to be able to stop and say, okay, how this can, the way this can help you, the
Mhm.
reason you should care about this,
Right.
So
Right.
being able to develop that skill of relating what it is you have to say to another person, as opposed to talking just for the sake of talking.
Yeah. What a great advice. Yeah. Well, and any other words of encouragement you want to leave us with as we wrap up? Words of encouragement for other communicators out there?
I think that often people with a communicator talent, especially when it's their top one, like myself, that there has been a lot their entire life. There has been a lot of you talk a lot. Oh wow, that you talk too
Mhm.
much. Or that's a lot of that was a lot of words. I've
Yeah.
heard all of those things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think being able to turn that around as a someone saying you talk a lot, instead of seeing it as a negative thing, like, yeah, actually I do. I'm good at it.
Mhm.
They say pick one thing and do it well, right? So
Yes. Yes.
no, but in all seriousness, I think that communication is the most important thing in any relationship ever. Whether it's a work relationship, it's in an interpersonal relationship, it's a friendship, it's a romantic relationship, it's, relating to anyone, communication is key. It is the foundation of our society. And so being able to effectively communicate will actually get you ahead. It gets you leaps and bounds ahead of those who struggle with it, because you are able to more clearly get your point across, and you're also more clearly able to facilitate conversations. Something else I found as a communicator, when going into like an argument or a discussion or anything like that, being able to look at all sides of the problem instead of just insisting that I'm right.
Right.
Being able to understand that everybody communicates differently, everybody sees the world differently. I think we have a unique perspective in being able to relate to other people, understand other people, and understand that, other people do have different perspectives and they're just as valid as anyone else's. I
Right.
think people get stuck in a lot of, it could get, excuse me, I think people get stuck a lot in the idea that their way is the right way.
Right.
And, communicators, I think, are able to see there are multiple right ways in most situations. There are multiple right ways to do something. Um, and so being able to, I feel like communicators are uniquely qualified to be able to help facilitate conversations, not just our own conversations, but conversations between others, being able to kind of mediate sometimes is
Right.
helpful. I
Right.
find that very useful with my children.
Yes. Yes.
They will often, get in a fight or whatever. And so one will come in and be like, this sister, da, da, da. And so I'll be like, I will call them both in and be like, okay, let's hear your side of the story. Now let's hear your side of
Mhm.
the story. And I'll say, well, it sounds like oftentimes it's just miscommunication. Like, it sounds like
Right.
this person wanted this thing and this person wanted this thing. And I feel like we just kind of had a disconnect here.
Right.
And we're better able to resolve conflict. Now, on a
Yes.
higher level, this is going to help in the workplace,
Right.
any other relationships that you have.
Right.
But I do find it exceptionally useful as a parent.
Yeah, no, wonderful words of wisdom, and thanks for all that encouragement. I think you are definitely right, right? The world needs communicators to bring that people high in communications to build that energy and facilitate those conversations and those relationships, which I think you do really well, Mary. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for making time for us today, and we hope those of you that are listening have enjoyed our time as well at Talent Treasures. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.